the billionaire lost everything, until the janitor's little girl changed his life in seconds. The rain crashed against the shattered windows of the one-stall empire, and in the middle of the empty, echoing boardroom stood a man who used to own the view. Ethan Ward, the billionaire everyone envied, stared at the auction papers in his trembling hands as the last piece of his legacy was stripped away. The empire he built from the ground up had collapsed in a matter of weeks, leaving him with nothing but regrets, silent guilt, and a hollow version of the man he once was. He had gone from a man whose signature made the market move to someone who couldn't pay rent on a one-room apartment. Betrayed by his own partner, abandoned by investors, judged by society, and left alone in a storm he never thought he would face. And yet, the real breaking point wasn't losing money. It was losing meaning, losing purpose, losing himself. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of humanity, then don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to KH Stories. Your support keeps these real, heart-touching stories alive. Ethan's days blended into each other. Cold mornings, long walks with hands stuffed inside torn pockets, and endless job applications that never received a reply. Once he had employees begging for his attention. Now he was invisible. He ate cheap street food, slept on a thin mattress, and avoided looking in mirrors because the man staring back didn't look like Ethan Ward. He looked like someone who had lived a lifetime of failure. But despite everything, he forced himself every morning to search for work. Pride no longer mattered. He just wanted a chance, any chance to feel human again. Weeks later, on a gray winter afternoon, he found himself standing in front of a massive hospital complex. He had been walking for hours, exhausted and shivering, when he saw a simple notice taped to a window, "Hearing night shift cleaners. Immediate start." Ethan closed his eyes and exhaled. Billionaire or not, he had to survive. He swallowed the last of his ego and walked in. The supervisor barely looked at him before handing him a uniform that smelled of bleach. "You start tonight." And that was it. No one cared about his past. No one knew who he was. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt strangely free, free of expectations, free of pressure, free of the heavy name he used to carry. But he also felt the painful sting of how far he had fallen. The floors he once walked on as a donor, he now scrubbed as a janitor. Every night, long after the halls emptied and the lights dimmed, Ethan quietly pushed his cleaning cart through each corridor. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and sorrow, but it was also filled with small whispers of hope. He learned to mop floors, clean spills, and take out trash bags heavier than his own spirit. The other janitors kept to themselves, except for one, Mr. Kareem, a thin, gray-haired man with warm eyes and a gentle smile. He never asked Ethan about his past or why a man with such educated hands was scrubbing floors. Instead, he offered small kindnesses: a cup of hot tea during breaks, a pair of gloves so Ethan's fingers wouldn't freeze, and sometimes quiet company. But the real light in those dark nights was Kareem. It was his daughter, Amina. Amina was 7 years old, tiny, with big round eyes and curly hair tied in 2 uneven ponytails. She often waited for her father in the staff room after school, sitting on a little chair with her feet dangling, drawing colorful pictures on cheap paper. She was shy at first, peeking at Ethan from behind Kareem's leg. But soon, she started greeting him with a bright smile, as if she could see something the world couldn't, something worth smiling at. One night Ethan found her drawing alone. She looked up and pointed at him with her blue crayon. "Uncle Ethan, sit. You look sad today." He didn't know what surprised him more, her honesty or the fact that it didn't hurt. He sat down slowly, watching her draw a man standing under a sun. "This is you," she said confidently, tapping the sun. "And this is the light coming back to you." For a moment, Ethan had no words. No one had looked at him with such simple, pure belief in a very long time. From that moment on, Amina's presence became the softest part of his nights. She talked to him about her school, her dreams, and even her favorite cartoons, breaking the silence that had been crushing him for months. And Ethan, for the first time since losing everything, felt warmth spreading inside him again. He didn't realize it yet, but that small child was stitching pieces of his heart back together. But the real turning point came weeks later, on a night colder than all before. Ethan was cleaning the pediatric wing when he heard soft sobbing echoing through the hallway. The sound was fragile, trembling like a bird caught in a storm. He followed it, worried, until he found Amina sitting alone, her tiny shoulders shaking as she hid her face in her hands. Ethan dropped to his knees beside her, his heart pounding. "Amina, what happened?" She looked up with red eyes. "Baba, he fainted at work. They took him to emergency. They said his heart is sick." Ethan felt the world tilt around him. Karim, the man who had given him warmth in his coldest moments, was fighting for his life, and no one even knew. Not the hospital administration, not donors. No one cared about a janitor collapsing on the job. But Ethan did. For the first time since losing his empire, something inside him ignited, a fire he thought he had lost forever. He stood up, grabbed Amina gently, and promised her she wasn't alone. He rushed her to the emergency department, demanding answers from doctors who barely noticed them. And when he found out Karim needed urgent surgery, expensive surgery he couldn't afford, Ethan felt a familiar ache in his chest. The ache of helplessness. But Amina looked at him with trembling lips and whispered, "Uncle Ethan, you always fix things." And that was the moment, the exact second Ethan Ward returned. He had no billions left, no company, no power, but he had knowledge, connections, and a heart that remembered how to fight. All night he made calls to old contacts, people who once shook his hand because they admired him but now hesitated because he was nobody. But Ethan didn't stop. He didn't give up. He didn't care how many said no. He fought with a determination he hadn't felt even at the height of his success. By morning, he had secured a donor foundation willing to sponsor Karim's surgery. When he told Amina, she threw her arms around him, crying into his chest. Ethan held her tightly, realizing that this was the first time anyone had hugged him in months. The surgery was long and difficult, but it was a success. Karim survived. But something else happened too, something unexpected. The hospital board, impressed by Ethan's handling of donors and negotiations, called him for a meeting. They didn't know his full story, only that he was articulate, intelligent, and capable.